All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this presentation, Dive into Data, Exploring NCEA 2023 to 2024 Catholic School Enrollment. I am BJ Visitation, the NCEA Director of Communications, and I'll be facilitating this webinar today. Just a few housekeeping notes as people are joining. We will be recording this session today. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A window. We ask that you please include your name and your organization with your question, and we will monitor any questions and try to answer them in the allotted time. Today's presenter is NCEA President and CEO Lincoln Snyder. We're also joined by Megan Bissell, NCEA Vice President of Research and Data, as well as Sarah Roberts, NCEA Data Analyst. Before I turn it over to Lincoln, let us begin in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. This is a prayer for Catholic schools from the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. Good and gracious God, we pray that the focus and foundation of our Catholic schools will always be the person of Jesus Christ. May we remember that we are called to work together as part of your universal church to build your kingdom in our midst. Let each of our Catholic schools, no matter how large or how small, whether urban, suburban, or rural, be recognized by its commitment to excellence, its efforts to form the whole child, its hospitality towards all, and its intentional development as a community of faith, collaboration, trust, and love. Help us to view every aspect of our world through the lens of the gospel and the teachings of our faith, and let every member of our Catholic school communities become a visible example of what it means to put faith into action. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lincoln, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, BJ. And so once again, acknowledging my colleagues, Megan and Sarah, who have been instrumental in compiling and authoring this report, our Dive into Data, exploring the Catholic school enrollment census data that we've gotten from you, our members, over this past year. So just a couple of notes before I start. So we're very proud that NCEA is in its 120th year. And so for over 120 years now, NCEA has served, among other things, as your association that collects the census for Catholic schools. So this has been a long tradition of us presenting this data. We are only able to collect it because every diocese with a school in the United States, and that's 175 of them, voluntarily provides their information to us, your association. So we're very grateful for this chance to make data and research an important part of our ministry and something that we can share with you as well. So let's go to the first slide. And so what we've done with the report this year is, every year we collect data on all sorts of topics from the schools that you send to us. And this year we have surfaced four major themes, four big things that we think that the data is telling us in terms of a story that we want to share back with you. And the first of these themes we're calling stability amongst chaos. The next slide. What does this mean? Well, we're very proud to report to you today that Catholic schools are stable for the third year in a row with their enrollment. So our enrollment this year was 1,693,327 students. And that is a statistical 0.0% change from last year. So congratulations. We're very proud of this stability after a long 20-year period in which we saw declines in the Catholic school population. As you can see, coming out of the pandemic, our system has stabilized. And so this has been a chaotic time for us for many reasons, not the least of which was a very disruptive pandemic that changed the way that we have to operate. Our Catholic schools performed very well during that pandemic, and we're very proud of everything that all 166,000 faculty, staff, teachers, and others that are professional employees of our schools achieved on behalf of our 1.7 million students, and we believe that this data reflects that. However, we're going to be talking about things that have changed within this number of 1,693,000 students. So, by the way, a note on this, preschools are now 10.1% of our total enrollment. So we're very proud of this too, that as parents have been looking for different solutions within their faith communities to better provide for their children, preschools have now become a full 10% of our enrollment. So next slide, BJ. So although our number has been stable, we have seen movement within the country. And so what this slide shows is what the enrollment has been since across regions rather. And so not all regions have performed equally over these past 5 years. And so the Southeast of all the regions has seen the biggest increase in enrollment over the last 5 years, so up a total of 3.6% for the section of the country that's colored in yellow on the report here. The area of the country we've seen the biggest decline in enrollment has been the Mideast. So what's important about this slide is that we've seen a lot of movement of people within the United States during the pandemic. And so we've seen population growth in the Southeast. And in part, our growth in Catholic school enrollment reflects those changes. Thank you. So another important thing to consider then with our schools is that the numbers of closures and openings both remain at near record low numbers for the second year in a row. So what does this mean? So a total of 55 closures and 20 openings. What are some trends within this that we think are important to note? We continue to see a long-term decline in the number of urban and inner city schools, and we continue to see an increase in suburban schools. In recent years, we had seen a lot of our openings being smaller schools that would have taken the form of classical liberal arts academies. We've also seen things like dual language immersion schools rather open, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But all in all, both the number of closures and openings remains low, certainly below the trend lines of the recent years. Also important to note, 38% of all of our schools have a waiting list. And so although our number remains steady, if we had had capacity in 38% of those schools, the waiting list, we would have seen an increase in population. So we have the next slide. And finally, where is the enrollment? So California is now our largest state for Catholic school enrollment at 186,000 students in California across 12 dioceses. New York is in second place at 124,000. And also of note, Ohio, Illinois, Pennsylvania rounding out the top five. We've seen growth in Florida, as I stated earlier, and that state is now at 90,700 students. Texas is at 64,000, and that's been another area of overall population growth too. So as you can see, we have a number of states that have pretty significant Catholic school populations. And the next. So the second theme that we wanted to talk about, we are calling commitment to inclusion. And we've seen some pretty interesting changes in the composition of our school populations that I'm looking forward to sharing with you under this theme. First of all, one of our biggest areas of growth within our Catholic school system is the increase in percentage of students with a diagnosed disability. So our schools have self-reported 7.8% of our students within the system having a diagnosed disability. That's up almost a full percent from the previous year. This means that we have 15,000 more students in our schools now that have a diagnosed disability over last year alone. Now, many of you have reached out and said, well, do we think the number might actually be higher? Yes, we know that all schools across the United States are serving more students with diagnosed disabilities. And so this is, we believe, part of just a growing national phenomenon. But I think that what this does show is that all of our schools have been working hard to better serve students with things like learning differences in a structured way within their programs. And so this has been an area of dramatic growth from 3.5% less than 10 years ago to 7.8% today within our schools. So, we've seen some societal changes and trends, and Catholic schools are making an effort to accommodate students with diagnosed disabilities within their communities. Also, the number of students with, or percentage rather, of students with a diagnosed disability does vary regionally. So we talked about growth in our schools in the Southeast. We also thought this was very interesting. 11.3% of students in the Southeast, according to reports, have a diagnosed disability. So we're seeing a correlation between the growth in the Southeast as well as a higher than average percentage of students with diagnosed disabilities in that region. Let's go to the next slide, please. Perfect. So the percentage of Hispanic and Latino students within our schools has stabilized at around 19%. So we had seen growth from 2015 through last year on year. This is the first year that it's come down a little bit. We know that the percentage of Hispanic and Latino Catholic school-age youth in the United States does continue to grow year on year. And so we know that our schools have been looking at ensuring that we are welcoming our Hispanic and Latino brothers and sisters into Catholic education in different ways. This is an area where we would hope to see continued growth in the future. Again, this is one of our fastest growing area of our Catholic student population. It's now over half of Catholic school-age youth in the United States are Hispanic or Latino. So, we hope to see continued growth in the future in this area. Go to the next. And again, the percentage of Hispanic and Latino youth within our schools does vary greatly by region. So in the West and Far West, we see 34.8% of our student population reported to be Hispanic or Latino students. The lower numbers in the Plain States, a high percentage in the Southeast at 20%. And so, an important thing to note is that for all dioceses in all parts of the country, we continue to see a growth in the Hispanic and Latino student population. Next, please. So one really innovative way that our schools have been working to create dynamic and innovative new communities is through dual language immersion programs. And we thought this was another really interesting bright spot as well. There are now 129 Catholic schools offering dual language immersion programs across the United States. And we show a regional breakdown of where dual language immersion schools are. If in a dual language immersion school, the students, and it's usually an elementary school, will receive a portion of their instruction in English and a portion in a target language, most commonly Spanish, but not only Spanish. And with the goal of graduating as biliterate and bilingual students by 8th grade. And so, these have been really popular programs in many communities, and we continue to see growth in this area. So again, we're now at a total of 129. We've seen some of our friends in higher education, like through Boston College and Loyola Marymount, try to organize Catholic dual language immersion program, or schools rather, into groups. We encourage continued support for this really innovative ministry. Again, we're seeing growth in all parts of the country in dual language immersion. Next, please. So another thing that has changed a little bit, we had seen dramatic growth in our non-Catholic student enrollment, in particular during the pandemic, where we went from 19.7% to 22%. This has come down just a little bit to 21%, but does seem to be stabilizing in that 20% area more or less. This is versus 5% of our students being non-Catholic in 1970. So year on year, our Catholic schools have seen growth in their non-Catholic student population. Of course, for us as ministries of the church, finding good ways to welcome non-Catholic families into our schools while also maintaining a strong Catholic identity and opportunities for ministry in our Catholic understanding are all very important to us. Also, and something that's evolving, we're now seeing 16% of our faculty reported to be non-Catholic, 12% not having a religious affiliation. So we do continue to see growth in the non-Catholic teacher population as well. Have the next slide. So as you've seen before, in many categories, we see big regional differences with the percentage of students, particular demographics. As we see in this slide, actually, our percentage of non-Catholic student enrollment outside the Plain States has been pretty consistent around that 21 to 22% number, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. But all of our schools in all regions are seeing, with the exception of the Plains, seeing populations of non-Catholic students of over 20%. So this is a national trend. So we can have the next slide. So our next theme that we want to talk about with you today is called adaptability and resilience. And by the way, I'm sure you've got questions and I've seen some popping up, so I will be taking plenty of time to answer all questions at the end. So type them in the Q&A or write them down and you can share them then, but we'll definitely get to all your questions. So adaptability and resilience for us means a couple of things. And if BJ, you could go to the next slide. One of them is we see a change in the nature of sponsorship of our schools. So when you think of Catholic schools in the United States, we often think of a parochial school system, a system in which most of the schools are owned and operated by parishes traditionally. So the bread and butter certainly of our system over its 2 centuries of existence in the United States. This is starting to change a little bit. So what this graph shows is the number of schools that elementary or middle schools that would have categorized themselves as parish schools, parochial schools, has gone from 84% in 1991 down to 63% today. And the number of schools, elementary and middle schools that are diocesan in their sponsorship have gone from 2.3% to 18%. So why is this happening? We believe this signals a trend toward continued consolidation of schools. So sometimes schools merge. Sometimes dioceses have come up with centralized management systems, or sometimes schools might have financial challenges and ask to move to diocesan sponsorship from parish sponsorship. Some schools are created now intentionally from the beginning as diocesan schools. So again, this is one of our biggest changes, shift from parochial governance to some sort of diocesan sponsorship, big numbers over the last 30 years. One thing that's been consistent is the split between our high schools that are privately sponsored, and that would mean mostly through a religious order or an independent parent group, versus schools that are diocesan. So 44% private sponsorship and 39% diocesan sponsorship for our secondary schools. Can we have the next, please? Another theme under adaptability and resilience has been the dramatic growth in parental choice programs. So I think this is one of the biggest changes year on year for us to talk about today. We've seen parental choice programs expand in over 20 states in 2023, and we're seeing more states coming on board with new or expanded parental choice legislation this year too. So this is a dramatic shift from just a few years ago. We can now report that 13.7% of our Catholic school students utilize parental choice programs as part of their being in the school. And in some states, it's more than half of our students. So in Ohio, Florida, Indiana, and Arizona, 50% or more of our students are in that school using a choice program to be there. So this has been a dramatic change in a lot of our states. And Iowa, at number 5 is at 39%. We're expecting to see continued growth in choice programs in a lot of states, not in all states, but many states continue to add choice legislation, and that's one more resource that families can access to afford their child a Catholic education. So we're very excited about this. We do believe that it's a contributor to the stability of our system with 13% of our students using these programs. We have the next. And our final theme for today that we're introducing is called Changing Composition of Faculty and Staff. So we have seen some changes this year in how who comprises our faculty and staff and their longevity in their respective positions. The next. So retention rates is a big point of conversation for all educators in the United States. We know that the teacher pipeline is down to something like half of what it was. And by that, I mean people who are in teacher formation programs, both private and Catholic and secular. But generally, our teacher turnover rates have been pretty consistent with past years. So our retention rate for teachers this past year was 88.1%. We have seen increased rates of turnover in leadership. So the retention rate for our principals was 81%. 19% of our principals this school year were new. And at the diocesan level, our retention rate for superintendents was 73.4%. That means that 26.6% of our superintendents this year were in their first year on the job. This has come up quite a bit. Our retention rate for superintendents in 2015, for example, was 94%. 2020, that grew to 84%. This year, over 40% of our superintendents nationally across those 175 dioceses are 20 months or less on the job. So as with public schools, we're seeing more turnover in the role of superintendent. Have the next slide. So those were our major themes. We've got a ton of data in this book, and so really the purpose of this conversation was just to really show you a bit of the tip of the iceberg of data that we've got for you. We're very pleased to tell you that all members of NCEA will be able to log into the website and find a PDF copy of our data report this year. We're only releasing it digitally. Our goal is really to make sure we get into the hands of you, our members, so you can get more acquainted with it. And we will be doing more follow-up work on these themes and other things that we want to bring to your attention from this year's report in terms of what the data is telling us and what kind of things we should be thinking about for the future in the ministry that we are really entrusted with as teachers within the Catholic Church. So that was the presentation, and I see that we have some questions, and so I am going to start answering them. So the first question, an open question here is, do you think that this is the result of increases in school choice states? The answer is yes and no. So we know that again, 13.7% of our students are using a choice program as part of their being in the school, and over 20% of our schools have students on choice programs within the school. So we definitely think it's been a positive factor, but it's not been the only thing that's seen growth. We have some states that have done a strong job of holding their own that don't have choice programs. So in California, for example, we've seen some good work happening in the West, and not every state has choice. So, of course, what does that mean for us as a system? Certainly, we hope that schools in choice states and leaders in choice states will continue to work to educate families about choice programs to make sure that we can see increases in enrollment there due to the increase in affordability. But it's not the only factor in growth and in sustaining our Catholic school population. And so Daryl Hagan, thank you, Daryl. So great to have you on the call. So Dan Ferris asks us, how does school sponsorship correlate with the schools that close each year? Dan, I don't have the data here. Sarah, did we have any correlation between school closures and sponsorship?
We do not, because we don't really ask any details about the schools that have closed in a diocese. We just ask about the closures at the elementary and secondary levels.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, that really is an interesting question, Dan. Sorry we didn't have the answer off the cuff for you. So Mercy Rob asked, are we collecting any data on serving migrant students? And I don't believe that we track which students within a school in our statistics are migrants or not. That's not one of those questions that we get into. We know that a number of dioceses and individual schools have programs to support migrants in accessing a Catholic education, but we don't track specific numbers on student populations from migrant populations. Thank you. So Tom Kiley asks, any generic data on tuition and salaries? So I know that we are looking at going to a new model for updating our financial report. We've published financial reports in the past as NCEA. A lot's changed in the last few years. And so, Tom, we do hope to run a new study on that. We don't really have something that we could present now as statistically valid. We're really hoping that when we roll out future studies, we can get more schools participating. And it kind of works like the NAEP, if you're familiar with that one, that we have to get a certain number of schools to participate for it to be statistically valid. But definitely we want to collect more on tuition and salaries. Also, we produce a study every 5 years on the superintendency called DEALS. The last one was in 2020, so we're coming up on renewing that study as well about the statistics about the superintendency, including salary information. So Jack asks, are we able to share the link to the entire results? Well, yes, for our NCEA members, I believe in the Friday mailing, we're going to be sending out information about the book, and you'll be able to log into the website and download the PDF from the bookstore after logging in. So stay tuned, Jack. We'll have that for you soon.
And just to add to that, we also sent out an email today with the link to the report, so you can also access through there.
Perfect. I stand corrected. So you should already have it. Thank you. So an anonymous attendee asks, recruitment and retention for faculty, staff, and leadership are challenging. What successes have we seen, and what are some trends to counter the trend? That is a great question. Again, our faculty retention rates actually seem fairly consistent with past trends. So teachers themselves are, despite all the challenges, if you think of the stress of COVID, we've seen fairly steady retention rates for teachers, especially for leadership, principals, and superintendents. We plan on having a dynamic conversation with membership this year about making sure that we are working together to build a bench for these positions. So NCEA has a new superintendent's academy that it's a program we're very proud of. We could see an expansion of that program. We had 35 people attend it this past year. So, certainly looking at building that bench of formed Catholic leaders is going to be critical for all dioceses. Partly local, but obviously we can help the national conversation as well, especially with superintendents. All right, so I have a question. Would it be possible to compare the Latino enrollment with the Latino population in the diocese or state? So yeah, we do have, I believe in the report, Sarah and Megan, the regional numbers on percentage of our Latino enrollment. And dioceses do track that information as well. We don't map it against overall populations within the state, but we know that that's pretty easy data to acquire. So if you needed to have some follow-up help on putting that together, we'd be happy to support you in that. But I can say that our Latino and Hispanic students are, generally speaking, underrepresented in our schools. So we do know that we, as a system, need to address the question of continued growth of community engagement with Latino and Hispanic Catholic populations in particular. All right, thank you, Jack. So Ted asks, will the slide deck be there as well? We weren't going to do the raw deck, but you will be able to get a recording of this. We'll be sharing that out, I believe, via YouTube link, correct, BJ? So the video will be available, so you'll be able to re-review it via that. Lauren says she already downloaded the report, so glad you could get it. Dave asks, will the presentation be available? Yes, Dave, absolutely. As a video link, we'll be able to make this available. All right. Well, we'll give it another moment. Really, we are here for you to answer any questions that we can. Oh, Kim raised a hand. Now, Kim, I think, Kim, if you have a question, there's a Q&A. Is there any chance that you'd be able to type in your question there? Oh, we have one from Diana while we're waiting for Kim to address. Have you made any progress with being able to capture additional ethnic backgrounds that are currently categorized as white? Sarah and Megan, I believe that the one ethnicity that's not a race that is identified in our statistic is Hispanic or Latino, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so I believe that we don't track additional ethnic backgrounds beyond Hispanic or Latino. Kim asks, how many schools have libraries? That is a wonderful question. Hopefully all of them, though I don't think that we track that data in our data set. Many of our schools have gone to things like learning centers from traditional libraries, and we've seen the stacks go away, but not everywhere. So wonderful question, Kim. I wish I knew. So I said a couple other hands up. Oh, I have to hit. Laura asks, do you specifically track data from schools who operate as micro schools? So we don't ask the question, I don't believe, quite the same way, but Sarah, about a quarter of our schools have a population of 150 students or fewer, correct?
I don't think we've checked that again in the past few years, but it is right around there and holds pretty steady in that general range.
Perfect. So, micro schools is one of those things that, means different things to different people. But when we did our series Greatness and Smallness a few years ago, we figured that around a quarter of our schools could be understood to be micro schools, depending on how one defines it, with that population of 150 or fewer students. Great questions. I have to just take a few more moments to allow the questions to continue to come. So I went over to questions that were answered. Diagnosed disability, is that a learning disability, developmental disability, or is all encompassing? I believe it's all encompassing. This question is about diagnosed disabilities. So we don't differentiate within our numbers. Ann Gore asked the question, are the 12% non-religious staff in addition to the 16% or the 16% of the total of two combined? I believe it's 16% total of 12% being the subset. Correct, Sarah?
No, so that's basically like it's this non-Catholic and then there's an unknown / not reported category that's separate. So those two don't overlap at all.
Okay, excuse me. So I stand corrected. Yeah, so as you heard, so it's 16% non-Catholic and 12% not declared. And Sarah to answer that. Perfect. Going back to the open questions, we had a few more. So John asked, do you have statistics on the percentage of full payer students versus those receiving a substantial economic subsidy? I do not believe that we do. And Ted asks, or says, very interested in microschool trends. Just to comment to support info on that. Yeah, we're very proud of the two books we produced on microschools, Greatness and Smallness, and do hope to produce more in the future as well. Larry Fury asked, did every diocese and archdiocese in the U.S. participate in the study? And the good news is, yes, they did. So this is a true census. It's, excuse me, a little bit later than last year because we really do wait for every single last diocese to send us this data. We're very proud of it being true census information. So everybody participated. John Reyes asked, why was unknown added as an option this year for race? Do we have an answer for that?
So we added it. It's always been an option for race. This year we added it to ethnicity because of the way that some dioceses and schools collect data. They don't necessarily report it. So in terms of ethnicity, to accurately report out what we're seeing in terms of like Hispanic and non-Hispanic, we added that just to make sure that all of the census numbers match in each category. So race, ethnicity, and grade level, and to make sure that we're not counting people where we don't actually know their ethnicity.
Thank you. All right, so do we have any more questions? All right, well, truly, if you have any future questions for us, please reach out. You can email or call any of your friends on the NCEA staff, and we'll try to get you the data and the information you need for your schools or to just answer your question. Again, the email went out already with the link to the book. And we have a QR code on the screen here as well. And you can use the URL ncea.org/Catholic School Data. So we look forward to sharing out more about this report in the future. Please take the time to read the book, and we're just very grateful for all of your support. This ministry really is a community ministry, and so it's great to be able to do a census where truly everybody voluntarily pitches in, and we're able to share this back with you. So thank you so much for your support and engagement this year. Any final questions or thoughts? All right. Well, thank you all very much. God bless. And we look forward to seeing you on a webinar soon in the future. So thank you, everybody.